Hello and welcome to the TorchCast, where we talk with politicians, legislators, and activists about what projects they're working on and what's going on in Missouri politics. This week, we're going to talk with Representative Paul Curtman about public-private partnerships and what that means for Missouri's Department of Transportation. Thanks for being with us, Paul.
Thanks for having me on, Dwayne. It's good to be here.
So, just real quick, what is a public-private partnership and how would it be innovative for the state of Missouri?
Well, a public-private partnership is really a very broad term. It can mean a lot of things, and I think it does mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. It's basically any involvement or any relationship in which the public sector and the private sector come together and cooperate, usually in order to meet a public sector need.
Okay, so we have a public sector need, so let's just pull something, very vague. We've got a public works, maybe a bridge needs put in. Okay, how would that work, a public-private partnership? Does the public open this for bids and then a private company comes in and they bid on it and maintain it, or what?
It can be done a number of different ways. Like I said, I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. If you look at the way the founding fathers used public-private partnerships, for example, in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, federal government was actually given authorization by the states to grant letters of marque and reprisal. So what that meant was that the federal government would go to the private sector and actually contract with people called privateers, and the privateers would raise capital through the private sector, and then they would run security on the high seas in order to meet a security need for the federal government. So whether it's us trying to meet a security need, maybe we need to paint fire hydrants, or maybe we need to stripe a parking lot for one of our state buildings, or maybe we need to build a new building, a public-private partnership can be a very short-term contract, or it can be a very long-term contract. In some cases, what some states have done is they've actually partnered with the private sector, and they have asked the private sector to raise all the capital to meet the needs of a new public building. In other words, raise all the capital that's going to be necessary to build a new public building through the private sector, and then they build the building, and then over the course of a 35, 45, or 50-year contract, the state will begin to pay that private contractor as long as they both continue to meet the terms of the original contract. What this does is it helps to mitigate some of the risk and liability that otherwise the taxpayers would incur.
So do you have any specific project that you're thinking about using this arrangement for?
No, but I can give you an example of one that we might have been able to use it for. Last year, the General Assembly passed a proposal in which the state would have been able to incur $400 million worth of brand new debt. During the debates, one of the reasons they asked to raise this debt was because we needed to rebuild this Fulton State Hospital. It's a hospital for the criminally insane. Instead of burdening the people with more debt, I think that it would have been better if we had an open door to actually work with the private sector and ask the private sector to raise some of the financing and maybe build the building and even handle some of the operations. That's one that we might have been able to use it for. Other states like Florida have used them for their state hospitals as well as some of their higher education infrastructure, for example. And I think that it's attractive because it brings in a whole new layer of accountability. When investors are involved, investors have a direct vested interest in making sure that the projects are completed and that they're successful, and that the terms of the contract are met, and that the company doesn't violate the contract or otherwise have to pull out of it, because they want to get a return on their investment too. So I would much rather be able to bring some more bring in some more accountability through the use of the private sector, harness that innovation that the private sector uses, rather than the government just continually asking the people for higher taxes or to burden them with more debt. I think it's a good opportunity. They can be used good, and they could be used bad. And I think that if we do it right and if we have checks and balances, we can do it right. And currently, Dwayne, I'll just go ahead and throw this out there. The state's already doing public-private partnerships. Unfortunately, we don't have the accountability that we need to make sure that the process is open and transparent to the public.
Isn't Indiana, aren't they using this for their toll roads also?
They are now. Indiana is kind of an interesting story. Indiana began operating a state-run toll road, but they were losing money because, like anything else the government ever tries to do, they lose money. They might as well be losing it through a sieve. That's how bad the government can be, how inefficient the government can be at doing things. After 3 years of losing money, they finally decided, since we already got this toll operation in place, let's invite the private sector in, let's have people throw out some bids. Eventually, a private company did win the proposal, and they gave the state of Indiana an upfront payment of at least one, maybe $200 million just for the permission to operate the toll that they already had existing.
Excellent, excellent. So there's a lot of concern that this is the term used is crony capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go on, I want to talk to everybody about this, okay? Stop using the term crony capitalist. There's no such thing as crony capitalism. There is cronyism and there is capitalism, but there's no capitalism in cronyism and there's no cronyism in capitalism. They're two separate things. So that's my soapbox for this TorchCast. Let's stop using the term crony capitalism. But the concern is that there will be cronyism in this public-private partnership setup. So how do we prevent that?
Well, I think that it's important, like anything else in government, we want to make sure that there's checks and balances. That's how we get accountability. We want to make sure that things are being done in the light of the public rather than in the dark corners or of some smoke-filled room in Jefferson City or Washington, D.C., if you want to look at it from a federal perspective. The bill that I have is House Bill 206, and it's important to note that the bill that I have is not an enabling bill. The bill does not allow the state to do public-private partnerships. What my bill does is it actually puts a whole system of checks and balances and accountability into the process. And one of the reasons is to make sure that the state's not doing deals with companies without there being any type of competitive negotiation. Competition is very important in the private sector. Any businessman will tell you that because they want to get the best value. They want to be able to make sure they get the best profit. They want to be efficient with the money that they're spending. It should be no different for the state. Whenever the state goes to spend taxpayer dollars within the private sector, whenever we're looking for contracts, we need to make sure that we have a competitive bid process so we get the best value for the taxpayers. So the bill that I have actually requires there to be a competitive process, and it's all open and available to the public. And the proposals that are chosen are posted online, and there's oversight from the auditor's office. These are a lot of things that don't currently exist in the way the state does it right now.
What's your bill number?
House Bill 206.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Agenda 21, because when I heard about this, I had some people talk to me about this being an Agenda 21 concern. Can you kind of explain the argument that they're making that it is Agenda 21, and how do you respond to that?
Sure. I think that a lot of people's introduction to public-private partnerships unfortunately hasn't been through Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The example that I gave you before, letters of marque and reprisal. There's a lot of people whose introduction to public-private partnerships has been through Agenda 21. And I think that public-private partnerships, like anything else the government does, it can do it right or it can do it wrong. It can do it in a way that steals people's liberty, that robs them of their freedom, or it can be done in a way that better secures people's freedom and helps maintain the strong tradition of liberty that we have in America. Agenda 21 is a United Nations memo or issue or agenda and I'm not the Agenda 21 expert. I'll just throw that out there for the sake of disclosure. But back in the early 90s, the United Nations released their memorandum, their Agenda 21, and it had a lot of ideas in it. And I think that the people's concern today is that with public-private partnerships is that the public sector will often partner with the private sector, but some of these private sector partnerships are with private non-governmental entities, private non-governmental think tanks. And what they're used to do is they're used to come up with policies that they will partner with a municipal or a county level government, and then they'll begin to implement them through planning and zoning laws. My bill has absolutely nothing to do with that. My bill is simply straightforward for only capital projects. And I've even defined what capital projects are in the opening pages of the bill. So even for the people that are concerned with public-private partnerships and how they can be used to implement Agenda 21, in my opinion, my bill is still the way to go because my bill implements a whole system of checks and balances and accountability that currently doesn't exist in a lot of the ways that they're being done at the state level right now.
So what kind of reception has this bill received?
It all depends on who you talk to. If you're talking with somebody whose key concern with government is the advancement of the Agenda 21 effort, they're going to be skeptical, and I totally understand that. If you're somebody who's worked with government before, as far as helping to provide some of our capital improvements or some of our infrastructure needs, if you're a businessman in that regard, you'll see it as an opportunity to be able to more fairly compete with your competitors for government projects. And if you're someone like myself, who's the chairman of the Committee on Government Efficiency, you'll see this as an opportunity to make sure that government is really doing things as efficiently as we possibly can. The state is spending 60% more money now than we were spending 15 years ago. We have 163 legislators. We have the whole Senate side, and then we have the executive branch also. There's a lot of money that's being spent out there, and we have to make sure that it's being done efficiently. And I believe one of the best ways to do that is to harness the power and the efficiency of the private sector.
So what's the House bill again, and where can people find and read it?
Sure. It's House Bill 206. And if anybody wants to go and read the whole bill, or they call my office and ask any questions about the bill, they can just go to www.house.mo.gov. They can look up Paul Curtman in the legislator directory there, and then they can click on this year's session, and my bill is right there, House Bill 206. Or they can go up to the top right corner of the House website, and they can look in the bill finder and just type HB 206, and the bill will immediately pop up.
Excellent. Well, I thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, and I appreciate everyone who took the time to watch. Again, if you have any questions or comments about the TorchCast, you can reach me at Dwayne@themissouritorch.com. And be sure to check out my other videos on YouTube, including the Paradigm Shift and #MoLedge. Until next week, this is the TorchCast. I'm Dwayne Lester. Take care. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of them in the future, please consider making a donation to the Missouri Torch here. And please subscribe to our new YouTube channel and visit us at themissouritorch.com.